Hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of All Nature from the Carbon Copy podcast. Today, we're diving into an inspiring conversation with Gnisha Bevan, part of the Black Seeds Network and one of the co-founders of the Nature Rising programme. We met Gnisha when recording episode 4 of this series, All Nature, Positively Buzzing. If you've not heard it yet, do go back and have a listen. We heard about the Black Seeds Network via the West of England Combined Authority. We've been asking the team what they were doing in terms of diversity and inclusion within their work on nature. This was meant to just be a short chat to add into the episode, but clearly there's a lot to discuss on this topic, so we felt it important to share as much of the interview as we can. Gnisha is a passionate and articulate advocate for environmental justice and for the need for better recognition of the nature-positive actions of many communities from the global majority. We hope you find this conversation as fascinating and inspiring as we did.
So my name is Gnisha Bevan and I lead the Black Seeds Network, which I started with Roger Griffith, MBE. It's about 5 years now that we've been running it for. We're a support network for Black environmentalists, environmentalists of colour, or I think we're moving more now to saying global majority environmentalists. We've got 3 priorities. They are recognition, resources and leadership. And we see those as ways to tackle inequality within environmental work, basically. So the biggest thing that I'm often focusing on is the fact that we're here, we're doing stuff, but it's not recognised. So number 1 is recognition. And then we end up talking a lot more about, okay, well, what happened to get us to this point? Why are we not being recognised? And through that, we start to look into much more structural issues, tackling oppression, inequality, and we move much more into kind of social justice and anti-racism work. This year, we've been running a programme with a consortium of partners, and we started the Nature Rising programme, which has been really, really exciting. It's a global majority-led programme. We're delighted to have run it, actually, because it's something that everyone in the consortium has been pushing for in one way or another for some time. The environmental sector is talking a lot about having to be inclusive and diverse. And so there's a lot of talk going on about that. But when we kind of ask for things to be done in the ways that are meaningful to us, that doesn't always happen, and it can be quite a complicated and quite a painful process, actually. We want to make environmental work in Bristol much more open to a lot of people. We want it to be meaningful to people from our cultures. We'll talk about we need to use different language, we need to use different terms, that we have knowledge already, that we've got skill, we've got leaders, and all of that somehow kind of gets pushed to the side and doesn't really get absorbed into a lot of mainstream environmental work. So we're really excited that Nature Rising was able to tackle this year. We partnered with Friends of the Earth, and they were the most incredible allies, and they very much kind of followed our lead. Normally, this setup is that an environmental institution of some kind will ask us to partner with them to improve diversity for them. Particularly, we focus on racial justice. Very often people will have in their minds like a pre-existing idea, and they'll kind of want to bring us into that. We'll say, no, we need to work together with you. We need to design it together with you. What you've got in mind might have to change quite considerably. You need to be ready to work with us. That's really difficult for some people. So this year, we were delighted because we actually just kind of did our own thing. We designed our own programme. We've been delighted to work with WECA, West of England Combined Authority. They've given us a lot of flexibility, and they've understood that we need to design the programmes in ways that meet our needs. What we have done is we've had different leaders that have done different elements of this programme. The first thing that happened was Amrish Pandya from Bristol Rainforest went into 4 different nursery schools, and he planted wildflowers with the children. But he didn't just do that. He talked to them about why we needed the wildflowers, which types of insects will visit them. And he trained the teachers in how to run this particular workshop. So now the teachers and the children, they can now run that workshop year on year. They produced this 1 meter square tray planted up with wildflower seeds, which eventually germinated, and then they were going to plant those out in their playgrounds. So now every year they've got the knowledge, they can plant a new metre square every year, or whenever they have the resources. So that was beautiful. And we've had the feedback that some of the children are less scared of bees now, and they're kind of welcoming the insects in. It sounds super cute. So that was Amrish. Then we had a community leader called Elsie Harp, and she's got her own business called Divina Botanica. And she worked up at Bridge Farm with refugees and asylum seekers. And she's a herbalist and also a florist. So she focused on herbs that are good for human health and also attract pollinators. So there's a kind of sense that, we look after nature and nature looks after us. And then she worked with refugee and asylum seeker communities to grow the herbs and so a few vegetables, I think, and then also like how to prepare the herbs to use as either like a balm or a herbal tincture. So she wanted to focus on that because it can happen that without warning, people seeking asylum can be moved on quite quickly within the UK. So they can be given 48 hours notice and then sent to a different place. So when there are gardening activities, for example, community gardening activities, they can do lots of manual labour there and then literally never see the fruits of their labour because they're moved on somewhere else. So it was really important to Elsie. She felt like she wanted to pass on knowledge and skills that people could take with them. And as she was doing the workshops, people were having these fantastic conversations about the different herbs and plants and realising that many of the plants people have in their own countries of origin. So, for example, the elder tree actually is present in lots of different areas and comes with lots of mythology and story and different uses. So we ended up having this really rich discussion which drew on lots of people's knowledge. And that is in a direct contrast to when I first started talking with people about these ideas. Even on this program, some people said, oh, no, well, I said, our communities will have knowledge. We need to work with people where they are. We need to find out what they know. And people said, oh, no, that won't be relevant here. It's from a different culture, a different climate, different ecology. And my response is, well, how do we know? We don't know what's going to work and what isn't. And isn't that a fascinating conversation to have that bridges cultures, bridges divides, helps us learn about different ecosystems, ecologies, climates across the world. So, yeah, I'm just absolutely thrilled that we've managed to get that part into it as well. And then we later had a community gardening day in a garden called St. Paul's Community Garden. And that was started by Tara Miran. And she started it during the lockdown and got this group together. And it was a really inclusive space. So we held a community gardening day there. And that was wonderful. And Elsie came and taught the wider group all about plants and herbs that attract pollinators. And then we planted herbs, we planted other plants, we kind of cleaned up the garden, and we made signs as well in both in English and different languages as well, so people would feel represented and welcomed. That knowledge sharing about different plants was also happening. People were starting to talk about things that they'd learnt as they were growing up, things, helping relatives plant fields. And so all this other knowledge was coming out, which is fantastic. And again, doesn't make it into the kind of mainstream conversations usually. And then to kind of top it all off, we also had Elsie showed us how to make balms with comfrey, don't know how you pronounce it, sorry. With a plant from the garden. Yes. Balms with a plant from the garden. And I've still got mine. It was just really beautiful. And lots of people felt that they really belonged. And that's some of the feedback that we've had is that, they really felt they belonged. They felt really welcomed. They really enjoyed themselves. And they didn't feel like they were kind of trying to put themselves in a box that maybe they sort of end up being pushed into when they're doing activities with the mainstream environmental sector.
I was going to ask how people come to get involved in all of these activities. Like, what's your process for letting people know about these events and these workshops and things like that? Like, because one of the things I think that certainly like the mainstream environmental organizations struggle with is actually reaching into communities and like accessing the people to let them know about things that are happening. So how does that work?
I mean, part of the reason that Nature Rising exists is because I can't keep talking about these same things. You've been asking, how can we get more global majority people involved? And I just think, well, I've told you so many ideas and you don't do them. So we're just going to have to build our own thing and show you that it's possible, because people also think, even now, even though there've been many other programs in Bristol, like Black and Green and others, that have shown that global majority communities are interested in the environment. I've got a slide that I created about 5 years ago now, and it lists all the barriers and all the solutions. And yet I'm being asked to speak on panels or getting asked the same questions. What are the barriers? What are the solutions? And I kind of think, well, they're the same as the ones that we talked about 5 years ago. So can we please do the solutions that we mentioned then? So in terms of getting more people involved, there are two fundamental things. One is that it's being led by the groups with lived experience. So in this case, it's led by global majority people who know our communities. Also, the people involved in Black Seeds Network and in Nature Rising in general, they've all got absolutely a fantastic skill set. So they're really talented community leaders. They know their stuff when it comes to community engagement. Lots of them have really great links into their communities, and they know all about, what happens there, the politics, who knows who you should talk to, who's good at what. Then there's also the people that we work with have a really good analysis of what's going on with racial equality and the environmental sector. I'd say all the leaders could tell you some really strong arguments about what's happening, really deep analysis. So in terms of how people can get involved with us, normally we'd be putting things out through our newsletter or on social media. Where we've recruited volunteers, actually, sometimes there's been a bit of an interview process, informal, but we want to make sure that people are kind of aligned with the way we want to work. We want to make sure that the allies are up for being trained in anti-racism, for example, because a lot of people aren't. You lose them very quickly when you start saying, we're going to have some difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. They'll fall away very quickly while still talking about inclusion and diversity. But actually getting into it becomes very difficult for some people. So we want to know that people are willing to work with us. And then depending on what the event is, if it's a celebration event or if it's a gardening event, then yeah, you can just come along if you hear about us. So little bits of comms, basically.
And it sounds like loads of people came, right? Like it was very, very popular. All these different events were very popular.
I think we probably could have had more people, to be honest. They were really popular. They're probably going to be some of the most diverse photos that you'll see coming out this year of anything environmental. I think I'm going to make that claim. And, in one way, that's absolutely fantastic and we're over the moon. But on the other hand, how sad that the environmental sector is still asking these questions. How can we be more diverse, and still not able to effectively answer them because they're not allowing the people from marginalized backgrounds to run the things that they need to. Mm. And everything that I've spoken about so far in terms of the engagement practices that we're using is pretty transferable. You need to co-produce things with people. You need to, if you want to engage certain communities, you need to make sure it's meaningful and relevant to them, not starting with your priorities, learn from other people. These really are community engagement basics as well. And I find that that's something that's often missing in the mainstream sector. I used to work in international development, and we had lots of training on how to work with communities. And, you think about your relationship. You can't just go somewhere and do everything that you want. You have to work with people and find out what they want. And that's the reason you're there, not to go to somebody else's place and start enforcing your will on them.
Colonialism.
Yes, it is. And, you know, if you talk like that, again, some people in the mainstream sector will get very defensive about that. You know, they're very surprised that you're couching what they're doing in those terms because they want to be doing good. So again, Black Seeds Network, we run some training. We run training on anti-racism and community engagement for the environmental sector, because we've noticed that this is something that really needs to happen. And also, even decision makers need to have a really good grounding and awareness of what, you know, participatory methods involve, and the money and the time and the expense and the resource needed. It's very people heavy. But if you do that bit right, then later you will save yourself money, because you won't have come up with a terrible solution that no one wants and isn't interested in. You'll have come up with something that's really interesting to people and hopefully useful and helps them in their lives and improves their lives in some way. And they created it with you. So you've got a much better relationship, and maybe you've opened the door to do more work as well. And it's not really about you anyway, it's all about them. So yeah, that's often missing in the mainstream sector. And I'd really love to see much better community engagement training for the environmental sector as a whole, because I think that would really help create much better solutions.
Thanks so much for listening to this bonus episode of the Carbon Copy podcast. It was presented by me, Isabel Sparrow, written and produced jointly by me and Bradley Ingham, who also edited the episode. Huge gratitude to Gnisha and the Black Seeds Network for sharing their story with us. For more inspiring content about taking action for climate and nature where you live, visit carboncopy.eco. That's ECO. Until next time, goodbye.